Evening, everybody. It's Astral Hex Encounter. Received a couple of Aries magazines in the mail recently. The one we're going to talk about today is the Voyage of the BSM Pandora from Aries magazine number 6. It's a paragraph game. When I was watching Callendale's video, he seemed to he had suggested that this was the first paragraph game. I haven't looked into it further than that. I will take his word as law when it comes to certain things like that. Either way, Aries magazine had a few paragraph games. My favorite being Return of the Stainless Steel Rat, but being kind of 21 months into this game, this one is a very, very close second. I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences and maybe what I like, what I prefer in Stainless Steel Rat over this game. So what's the basic premise? The basic premise is that you are a group of scientists sent out on a mission to explore space. Here's your interstellar display right here. And you're traveling through space and exploring planets. Each of the planets, through a kind of random die roll, is one of the different terrains. There's 8 different terrains, and this is maybe where some of the limitations show themselves. I copied and laminated some of the charts and tables just so I didn't have to keep flipping back and forth. I can have them laid out with me. So you see that one there, the exploration matrix. I'm trying a new camera setup here, so let me know in the comments how this is working out for you. So the exploration matrix, there's the planet table here as well. Those are the two that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about. So looking at each of the planets, there's basically 3 possible solutions. The numbers, like for Corcoran, for example, 85, 94, and 104, those are references to the paragraph that you'll read once you land on a planet. It's a little limited in that respect as far as the options for each planet. It gives you a good kind of basis of choices. In those particular paragraphs, you then do another die roll that will determine what hex you start on, and what hex you start on will determine which kind of landscape it is that you're going to visit. More often than not in my games so far, I've had a choice between 2, sometimes 3 different landscapes. I think there was one time where all of the possibilities were in one specific terrain, but for the most part it does randomize it a little bit. So you land on a planet, you then decide what paragraph it's going to be based on your die roll on the planet table. You can read that paragraph and it starts giving you some of the planet and environment attributes, like the gravity, atmosphere, hydrograph, life support, and the climate. Each different gravity is going to correlate with the colored squares on your time and supply track on the right. We'll talk a little bit more about that. You read the paragraph and you can get a sense of what your options are going to be before you find out which hex you're going to actually land in. You put together a survey team, basically, or an expedition team, I guess is a better way to put it. Each different planet, as I said, has a different gravity. So if we look here on the port capacity table, if it's near weightlessness, your shuttle can hold 120. Light is 100, Earth-like is 80, heavy is 60, oppressive is 30. Each of the chits have a weight attached to them. For example, let's see if this works here. That focuses. This is the stun bomb. That number 1 in the top right, that's its weight. So a stun bomb is 1. For the characters themselves, for example, here's the commanding officer. Let's see if that focuses. There we go. There's the commanding officer. The middle number 5 is the commanding officer's weight. The 5 to the right of it is the commanding officer's port value. The port value is how much the commanding officer can carry. And maybe it's better illustrated by this sheet here. Another little cheat sheet that I created for myself. I found one of the things I had to do all the time was refer back to which number was which. So on the sample character counter, there's the capture combat, kill combat, weight, port, and speed. And then on the sample creature counter, etc. Sample bot counter lays out exactly what it is, and then on the tools lays out what each number means as well. I found this unbelievably handy. I've played now kind of 2 nights in a row. After the first night of playing is when I created this sheet, and I found that it helped incredibly just to have this, able to reference this all the time, because I can never remember which number is which. So depending on the gravity, that's going to tell you how much you can bring down to the planet's surface. And then depending on what characters you send out from the shuttle, which is this chit here on the expedition display, the shuttle lands on the planet, and then your expedition party can either be on foot or going to be in the rover here. And the rover has its own capacity there. So I think I've only used the rover once. Using the rover does cut down on the costs that it, as with many of these games, every single different terrain type costs, you expend a different amount of hours traveling through it. So the rover does cut down on that, generally by a half, but there are limitations to where the rover can go. For example, in a cave hex, if we look on our terrain effects chart, if you look at the top row here, how am I going to do this? The light is there in the way. So on the top row, we have supply modifier, terrain type, and then it lays out how much it'll cost to enter the hex on foot, how much by rover, and then how much to explore. And all of those numbers are the hours that it will take. Your hours refer you back to this, the supply track here. If you're in a heavy atmosphere, at every 12 hours you have to do a supply check. When you're bringing characters and tools and weapons down to the planet's surface, you always want to expend a bunch of those points for a supply. The more supply you have, the longer you can take to explore the terrain, basically. I've tried for the most part and been successful with a bunch of rolls where I've had a lot of Earth-like atmospheres that I've traveled and light. So I've been able to take 80 to 100 supply points, I guess, or weight points with me, which has allowed me to always have kind of 30 supply and then still have a really good team to come down with me. The more supply you have, the longer you can explore, is the gist of that. So every time you hit one of the supply track numbers, depending on your gravity, you basically have to feed your team, and not only feed them, but the supply refers to the equipment that you have as well too. So kind of maintenance, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. And you expend supply points every time you do the supply check. So when you're going to explore a hex, you're going to be looking at things like, for example, this one here, if you can see it. There's no zoom on this camera, unfortunately. This is a flat and light vegetation. So you'd go to this table here. To explore a flat, it costs you 2, and to explore a light vegetation, it costs you 2. So every different terrain type that's in that particular hex, you have to expend exploration hours. So in that case, to explore this hex, it would cost you 4 hours, which you'd then kind of put on your track. You then do a die roll on the exploration matrix up here at the top. One die is the left-hand column, and then the second die is the top column there, or running across. So this is kind of where another of the limitations comes into play. Let's see, how many are there? For stainless steel rat, I was looking back at it today, and there was 225 different paragraphs. This has 232 paragraphs. And for some reason, this is kind of the first point of the limitations of this particular game. Because you're exploring so many different hexes in one turn, the repetition makes itself apparent pretty darn quick. When you get referred to one of those paragraphs through the exploration matrix, it gives you normally 3, sometimes 4 different options. So for example, if you're exploring an abyss hex, refer to paragraph blah blah blah. If you're exploring underwater, refer to paragraph such and such. If the atmosphere is corrosive, refer to this paragraph. And if any of those apply to the hex that you're exploring, then you refer to the paragraph and follow the story. There's a lot of times where you're doing the die rolls and checking the paragraphs and nothing applies, which I don't really have an issue with that. That kind of works for me. I was having quite a bit of luck with my exploration. So from game to game, that's going to really change for you. But there are limitations. I was kind of keeping track of the paragraphs that I was referring to every time I went to a planet. And I wasn't getting a lot of duplication. You can see a couple where I started duplicating when I was on a planet itself. Down here, for example, when I explored New Alto, paragraph 74 came up 3 different times. You want to keep doing that, though. It wasn't so much a matter of when that paragraph would come up, not refer to it again, because every single time you're doing an exploration, you're on a different hex. So all of those differentials are going to come into play. So it does offer some nice randomization, but it would be a little more interesting, and I don't quite know how you would do it, is have a different exploration matrix for each of the different terrains. I think it's just the limitation without doing kind of a 500 paragraph game or more. you kind of have to stop somewhere and you have to make it work somehow. Oh, interesting. I think Callendale did the same thing, and I'm just looking at it right now. Die modifiers. I completely just ignored this whole column, this whole side here. Anyway, that's beside the point. So, that's my biggest issue with this game. This game has been incredibly fun to play. Um, the idea of exploring these different terrains, coming across some of these different creatures and trying to capture them for the most part to gain the victory points has been a real blast. Now, the limitation is this is not a game that I could see myself playing multiple times in a year. This is a one, maybe two time a year game. Once you kind of become familiar with the paragraphs, I could see it becoming pretty tedious. Once you're familiar, I've already run across the same creatures a couple of times in my game so far. You keep track of all of the creature attributes, creatures that you've come across. So you can see Ironhorn has been on there twice. The Fastidiomite has been on there twice as well. Both times the Fastidiomite has gotten away, so I haven't captured one yet. The Ironhorn I've captured twice, and they were on different planets. So there's some of that. Yeah, they were on different planets and different terrains, I believe. And I've come across the same creature, which is also maybe where the limitation comes in as well. Yeah, almost a different terrain for each of the planets would have been great as well. But then that, I guess, would lose you some of that randomization too, because there's multiple options for each of the planets. So from game to game, you don't really know what terrain you're going to get for a planet, which would then, I guess if you knew which terrain, you'd go to specific planets. Some may be more filled with creatures than others, I suppose. But I think those, for the most part, are minor issues that I have with the game, because the rest of it has been really, really enjoyable. I just don't know how much replayability there is. With Stainless Steel Rat, even though there's less paragraphs, you're moving from room to room on the ship and doing your exploration. There's a lot more opportunity for a depth of a game that I could see playing multiple times and not having the same story unfold. Yeah, so the amount of exploration that you're doing and the amount of paragraph lookups that you're doing really have this one repeat itself quite a bit, where Stainless Steel Rat doesn't suffer from the same problem, or at least in the times that I've played Stainless Steel Rat, which is a few times now at this point. I found them each really, really enjoyable. That said, this is still a hell of a great game. I think this is probably one of my favorites in the Ares. Blue Botic did a really great video looking at this, and I think it was early on in his exploration of Ares, and one of the things that he mentioned is the amount of bookkeeping and rolling a die to then refer to a chart which tells you what that die roll actually means, that sort of thing. And he kind of had that as a negative. I didn't find it a negative for me. I found once I got into it, those lookups became really, really quick, especially with the way that I've laid out all the extra charts here and the way I've laid out my extra materials, where I can easily refer to it just without having to flip back and forth. Because it was a complaint that Callendale had in his video as well, to the limitations of having a instruction manual within a magazine and then the charts and the paragraphs all in one spot. I think you need to lay it out like this. It would almost be beneficial to lay out the paragraphs in a separate little book, so you could just use the magazine for looking up rules, which I've had to refer to a number of times, but not as much as I thought I would have to. Again, because you have so much opportunity of repetition here, once you've done it half a dozen times, there was a lot of stuff that stuck with me. That also might be just because of the amount of time that I've played these style of games over the last few years since I've started getting into this particular type of gaming. Maybe some of that has come from there as well. The other thing that I would recommend is I did this today. Where's the actual sheet? I created some more explored chits as well. Just kind of everything is available online on archive.org. You can find each of the Ares magazines, which is the same website that I believe Bluebotic was using as well to create the games. So they have all the chits scanned as well, the fronts and the backs. So I just created some more explored tokens and then put them on comic book backing boards, spray glued them on there and cut out a bunch. There was a couple of planets where, especially when I hit the light gravity planet, where my supply check wasn't until 22 and I had 30 supply, I managed to explore most of the planet. So that's a lot of extra chits that I was trying to use just to mark the ones that I explored, so I kind of didn't cheat and explore the same hex multiple times as I was traveling through. So I would advise that as well too, just creating yourself something else to mark off the terrains. As I mentioned at the beginning, at least I think I did, you can do a 10-month mission, a 20-month mission, or a 30-month mission. No matter which one you choose, for a victory, you have to get double the amount of victory points. So in my 30-month mission, I have to get 60 victory points. Right now, I'm sitting at a total of 43 victory points. And I'm just about to explore Piccola or Piccoli or something, however you pronounce it. I have 3 planets to go before I have to get back. I still have 9 months to go, which is 1, 2, 3. There's 4 months just to get to the other planets. Every time you move a hex, that's a month, and that counter starts going down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically, I have to get 6 more months, which is going to be great. I should be able to explore them as long as anything horrible doesn't happen, and I'd still have a couple of months left over. When your characters get injured, you mark them off on this sheet here. The crew log there, the Pandora crew log, their endurance are those little boxes there, and you can see there's a few that have been erased. If they get injured on the surface, if you make it off the planet and they still have some endurance left over, you can expend a month or 2, depending on how many characters and how much you want to heal them, just healing your characters, which has really been helpful. You can fix some of your equipment as well too. While you're down on the planet, you can also fix some of your bots if the bots get hurt as well. The bots I've found sort of helpful because I've always been trying to capture. For example, this one has been great. The Specibot there, you can see the capture value of it is 7, which has been really, really helpful. How you determine when you're in combat, you refer to this table here, you look at the combat value of your creature, and then the combat value of your team, subtract the 2, and there's the combat differential there. And then each one is a different outcome. A being the best one. You can capture the creature and only suffer 1 point of damage for your crew member or a particular item. You can also expend the damage towards the tools that you have with you. So, yeah. that's the basic overview. I know it's not as easy maybe to follow. Hopefully you followed enough of it to get a sense of it. I have a feeling anybody who is watching this video has played the game, so I'm sure you have a little bit of a sense of it. This is more just to get my thoughts on it. So this one has been a hit. The other Ares Magazine game that I received in the mail was for The Last Crusade, which I don't know. I think it'll be okay. I believe I said in my last video that I don't think the subject matter appeals to me as much. So we'll see what my mindset is going into that game. Basically, a religious group colonizing the planets and spreading their religion, which really just is not an appealing subject to me. So I don't know if I kind of put myself in the mindset of the people that are trying to stop this crusade from happening. I haven't looked into the rules. There's some videos that have just popped up recently about the Last Crusade. One of them ended up on Board Game Geek, and the other one is on YouTube. Both done by the same individual, whose name I'm blanking on right now, so apologies for that. So the other side of this Voyage of the BSM Pandora is Wreck of the BSM Pandora came out first in Ares Magazine, and then they decided to do the prequel. I did find online, I just haven't printed it off yet, there was a one-page, I don't know if it was from a future Ares magazine or if it was in a Moves magazine, I can't remember off the top of my head right now. There was a way to have the games play as a campaign. So taking the creatures that you've captured in Voyage and putting them in Wreck, which puzzles me that since Voyage came second, they wouldn't just use the same creatures from Wreck and insert them into this game, but whatever. They've created some tables where you can, they give you the values of the creatures from this game that work in Wreck of the BSM Pandora. The premise of Wreck of BSM Pandora is now your ship is kind of lost in space, broken down in space rather, and the creatures have are just kind of running wild on the ship, and you have to kind of recapture them and put them back in their pods. So that's my plan here, is to play this as a campaign. That's why I'm trying to keep really good track of everything that I do, just in case I need some of that information to kind of give Rec a little bit more flavor. So yeah, there you go. Voyage of the BSM Pandora. I've been wanting to play this game for I don't know how long. Probably since I played Wreck of the BSM Pandora. Callendale's video has been up, I think, since like 2013. So I've wanted to play this for quite a few years. It was just one of those issues that, for some reason, isn't one that pops up very often. A lot of the other Ares Magazine's games are surprisingly easy to find. This one just doesn't pop up. This one and Albion, actually. Albion goes for kind of twice the amount that this one cost for me. But I'm really, really glad that I finally got my hands on it. Big fan of Ares, big fan of magazine games in general, but this era of game really holds a special place for me. Even though I didn't grow up with them, there's just something about it, as I've said before in many videos. The design I absolutely love. The art on the chits themselves I absolutely love. So beautiful, beautiful stuff. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. And if you haven't played any Ares Magazine games, go for it. Have a search on Board Game Geek. Keep your eyes on the secondary market and try to get yourself some. Or do what Blue Botic did. Archive.org has all of the Ares magazines available. Right now, as of the filming of this, which is mid-December 2018, what is it today? The 15th, I believe. Board Game Geek and archive.org are both having kind of fundraisers where they're looking for your support. If you can afford it, please support both of those websites. It's worth it. They're fantastic resources for Board Game Geek is a fantastic resource for everything board game related and magazine game related. And I've been a member there now for a few years. I've only been able to donate a couple of times, but it's such a great resource. They do need support to kind of keep going. And I would say archive.org is a great resource for just everything. The amount of art and entertainment and articles and everything that you can find on that website, really just phenomenal. So support both of those, and thanks very much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.